Chinook's rotors beat the air like thunder as Captain Maya Reeves gripped the nylon webbing, watching the Afghan mountains rise through the dust-streaked window. Forward operating base Hammerfall appeared below, a collection of blast walls, sandbag fortifications, and canvas tents baking under the merciless sun. This would be home for the next 9 months. The helicopter touched down in a storm of brown dust that invaded every pore. Maya grabbed her pack and ducked under the still-spinning rotors, her boots hitting Afghan soil for the first time. The heat slapped her like a physical force, even through her combat uniform. She'd trained for this moment for 5 years, but training and reality were different countries. A group of infantry soldiers stood nearby, watching the new arrivals with the casual indifference of men who'd seen too many rotations. Maya caught their expressions as she walked past, the slight smirks, the exchanged glances, the barely concealed eye rolls. She knew what they saw: a woman, 5'6", lean build, wearing the intelligence officer's insignia, not the hardened infantryman they respected. "Another desk jockey," someone muttered, just loud enough to be heard. Maya kept walking, her face neutral. She'd heard worse at Fort Bragg, at language school, at every assignment where she'd had to prove herself twice as hard for half the credit. Her personnel file told a different story than her appearance suggested: top of her class in tactical analysis, fluent in Pashto and Dari, 3 commendations for cracking insurgent communication networks that saved dozens of lives. But files didn't matter here. Only what you could do when the bullets started flying. The operations center was a plywood structure reinforced with sandbags, cooled by generators that struggled against the 110-degree heat. Inside, battalion staff huddled over maps and computer screens tracking the province's complex web of tribal politics and Taliban movements. Major Briggs, the executive officer, glanced up as she entered. "Captain Reeves, welcome to Hammerfall." His handshake was firm but perfunctory. "You're replacing Captain Morrison on the intelligence staff. He'll brief you before he rotates out tomorrow." "Thank you, sir. I'm ready to contribute however needed." Lieutenant Chen, the Alpha Company commander, looked up from a tactical map. His eyes traveled over her with undisguised skepticism. He was stocky, muscular, with the weathered face of someone who'd spent years in the sandbox. "Intel support is simple, Captain. You analyze patterns, brief us on enemy movements, and stay in the TOC while we handle the actual fighting. Clear?" Maya met his gaze steadily. "Crystal clear, Lieutenant. Though I'd like to request permission to accompany patrols when possible. I've found that ground-level observation significantly improves analytical accuracy." The room went quiet. A few soldiers exchanged amused looks. Chen's eyebrows rose. "You want to go outside the wire, into actual combat zones?" "To observe and gather intelligence, yes, sir. I can't effectively analyze insurgent tactics from inside an air-conditioned room. I need to understand the terrain, the population dynamics, how our enemies actually operate in real conditions." A sergeant actually laughed, a short, sharp bark quickly suppressed. Chen rubbed his jaw, clearly trying to decide if she was serious or naive. "Captain, no offense, but your intelligence corps. We're infantry. Different missions, different skill sets. You do your job, we'll do ours." "I understand the distinction, sir. But intelligence and operations should be integrated, not separated. If I'm going to provide you with actionable analysis—" "What you're going to provide," Chen interrupted, his voice harder now, "is what every intel officer provides: briefings, reports, analysis from available data. We've got enough to worry about without babysitting," he caught himself, but the implication hung in the air. "Without additional personnel on patrol who aren't combat trained." Major Briggs intervened. "Let's table this discussion for now. Captain Reeves, get settled in. We'll discuss patrol integration later." Maya nodded and left, hearing the conversation resume behind her as soon as the door closed. Their voices carried through the thin plywood. "She'll request reassignment within a month," someone said. 2 weeks, another voice countered. First time mortars hit, she'll be on the next bird out. Chen's voice was clearer. Intelligence officers don't last out here. They're academics playing soldier. When the shooting starts, they remember what they really are. Maya walked to her quarters, a small corner of a tent she'd share with 2 female medics. She unpacked methodically, arranging her gear with practiced efficiency. On the small plywood shelf, she placed a photo of her father, a Marine Corps gunnery sergeant who died in Fallujah when she was 16. His last letter to her sat in her pocket, worn from reading. Don't let anyone tell you what you can't do. Show them what you can. Through the canvas wall, she heard soldiers talking near the operations center. Someone had started a betting pool. How long until the new intel captain requested transfer back to a safer posting? The over-under was 30 days. Maya lay back on her cot, staring at the canvas ceiling. Outside, the fire base's defensive weapons rattled through test fires. Somewhere in the distance, an explosion echoed across the valley. Controlled detonation or IED, she couldn't tell yet. This was the sound of Afghanistan, the rhythm of war. They thought she was soft, untested, unsuited for the reality of combat. They thought her analytical mind and academic background made her weak. They thought she didn't belong. Maya closed her eyes, her father's words echoing in her mind. In the morning, she'd request to join the next patrol. She'd show them exactly what kind of soldier she was. She just didn't know yet how dramatically that opportunity would come, or how violently it would shatter every assumption they'd made about her. The Afghan night settled over Hammerfall, and Captain Maya Reeves slept the light, alert sleep of a soldier in enemy territory, waiting for her chance to prove them all wrong. The patrol brief started at 4:30 hours, with Lieutenant Chen jabbing a finger at the map spread across the operations table. Standard route clearance through Objective Kilo, the village of Darwazgai. Intelligence suggests minimal Taliban presence. We verify, collect atmospherics, and return by 1100 hours. Maya stood at the back of the briefing room, fully geared. Body armor, helmet, rifle, 6 magazines. She'd practiced with the equipment until every movement felt natural, despite the dubious looks from the infantry squad. Chen's eyes found her. Captain Reeves will be observing. She stays with the command element, center of formation. Clear. Clear, sir, Maya replied. Sergeant Kowalski, a broad-shouldered veteran with 3 deployment patches, leaned toward his buddy. Great. Now we're babysitting. His voice carried just enough for her to hear. The patrol loaded into 4 Humvees as dawn painted the mountains in shades of amber and gold. Maya climbed into the second vehicle, wedged between Kowalski and a young private named Davis who looked barely old enough to shave. The convoy rolled out through Hammerfall's main gate, leaving the relative safety of concrete barriers and guard towers for the wild uncertainty of Route Silver. The road wound through rocky terrain dotted with mud brick compounds. Children appeared in doorways, watching with ancient eyes. An old man herded goats across the path, barely acknowledging the massive American vehicles rumbling past. Maya studied everything, her mind cataloging details, comparing what she saw against the intelligence briefings she'd memorized. Something was wrong. The village of Darwazgai usually bustled with morning activity according to pattern-of-life reports. Women fetched water, merchants opened shops, farmers led donkeys to fields. But today, the streets felt hollow, too quiet. Doors that should be open were barricaded. Windows that usually showed faces were empty. Lieutenant, Maya spoke into the radio, I'm seeing behavioral anomalies. The village is too quiet for 600 hours. Women and children are absent, I recommend. Noted, Captain, Chen's voice crackled back dismissive. Probably just prayer time. Stay alert but maintain course. Maya's jaw tightened. This wasn't prayer time. Every instinct she'd honed through years of analyzing insurgent patterns screamed danger. She scanned the rooftops, the alleyways, the dark windows overlooking the main street their convoy was now entering. Lieutenant, I strongly advise. The world exploded. The lead Humvee erupted in a ball of orange flame as an RPG struck its engine block. The blast wave slammed into Maya's vehicle, shattering windows, filling the air with smoke and screaming metal. Her head cracked against the door frame, stars bursting across her vision. "Contact, contact," someone shouted. Gunfire erupted from every direction, a symphony of AK-47s creating overlapping fields of fire. Rounds punched through their Humvee's doors with metallic shrieks. The windshield spiderwebbed, then disintegrated. "Out, out, out," Kowalski roared. Maya's door was jammed. She threw her shoulder against it once, twice, then kicked it open with both boots. She tumbled into the street as bullets cracked overhead, that distinctive snap-crack sound that meant they were passing inches away. Training took over. She low-crawled to the nearest cover, a low concrete wall, her heart hammering against her ribs. The scene was chaos. The lead Humvee burned, black smoke billowing into the sky. Bodies lay motionless in the street. Lieutenant Chen was dragging himself away from the wreckage, his leg twisted at an unnatural angle, leaving a smear of blood on the dirt. Man down," Private Davis screamed, his voice breaking with panic. Muzzle flashes sparked from rooftops, from windows, from positions in alleyways. The insurgents had set up a perfect kill zone, turning the narrow street into a shooting gallery. The Americans were pinned, exposed, dying. Maya's radio crackled, partial transmissions, screaming, static. She could hear Chen trying to call for backup, his voice strained with pain. Another RPG streaked overhead, impacting against a wall and showering them with debris. Chen was 30 feet away, completely exposed in the middle of the street, unable to move. A PKM machine gun opened up from a second-story window, stitching rounds toward him, kicking up dust geysers that walked closer with each burst. Maya didn't think, she moved. She sprinted from cover into the open street as bullets cracked around her like bullwhips. Her boots pounded the dirt. 10 feet, 20 feet. Chen's eyes widened as she reached him, grabbing his tactical vest with both hands. He was heavy, 200 pounds of soldier-plus gear, but adrenaline turned her muscles to steel. Move, she screamed, dragging him backward. A round snapped past her ear, so close she felt the displacement of air. Another punched into the ground beside her boot. She kept pulling, legs burning, lungs screaming, dragging Chen toward the concrete wall where Kowalski and 2 others provided covering fire. They tumbled behind cover just as a burst of machine gun fire chewed through the space where they'd been. Maya pressed her hand against Chen's leg wound, blood poolsing between her fingers. His face was white, shocky. "Radio," he gasped, pushing the handset toward her with trembling fingers. Call it in." Maya grabbed the radio with blood-slick hands. "Hammerfall, this is Reaper 6 Actual. Troops in contact, heavy casualties. We need immediate air support and medevac. Multiple wounded, KIA. Heavy enemy fire from all directions." The response that came back made her blood run cold. "Reaper 6, be advised, rotary wing assets are grounded due to weather. Fixed-wing air support is 40 minutes out. Weather front moving through. You're on your own." 40 minutes? They wouldn't last 40 minutes. Kowalski appeared beside her, his face grim. "Staff Sergeant Michaels is dead, so is Corporal Tanner and PFC Rodriguez. That leaves 8 of us effective." He looked at Chen, who was fading in and out of consciousness. "Lieutenant's combat ineffective. You're the ranking officer, ma'am." Maya stared at him. 8 soldiers, surrounded, outgunned. No air support. The enemy had them dead to rights, and they knew it. The insurgent fire was systematic, coordinated, designed to pin them until they could be overrun. 7 pairs of eyes turned toward her, waiting, desperate, some still skeptical but mostly just terrified. In that moment, Captain Maya Reeves had a choice. Play it safe, try to hold position and pray they survived 40 minutes of sustained assault, or do something completely insane. Her analytical mind shifted into overdrive, processing the tactical situation with the same intensity she'd applied to thousands of intelligence problems. She wasn't seeing soldiers and buildings anymore. She was seeing patterns, angles, vulnerabilities. The insurgents had made one critical mistake. Maya grabbed Kowalski's arm, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. "Sergeant, I need you to trust me. We can't hold here for 40 minutes, but I've identified their command element, that building, eastern flank, third floor window. They're coordinating from there." Kowalski followed her gaze, his expression skeptical. "So what?" Maya checked her rifle, chambering a round. "So we're going to assault through this ambush and kill every single one of them." The soldiers stared at her like she'd lost her mind. But as another RPG impacted nearby, as the machine gun fire intensified, as the reality of their situation crystallized, they realized she might be right. Sometimes the only way out was through. Sergeant Kowalski stared at Maya like she just suggested they sprout wings and fly out of the kill zone. "Ma'am, with all due respect, that's suicide. We're pinned down by at least 30 hostiles with crew-served weapons and RPGs. We assault, we die." Another burst of PKM fire tore chunks out of their concrete wall, raining dust over them. Private Davis flinched, his hands shaking as he tried to reload his rifle. Somewhere to their left, a wounded soldier screamed for a medic. Maya's mind worked like a supercomputer, processing variables at lightning speed. She'd spent 5 years studying insurgent tactics, analyzing hundreds of ambushes, understanding how Taliban fighters thought and operated. They were good, disciplined, coordinated, patient, but they followed patterns. "They expect us to hunker down and wait for air support," Maya said, her voice cutting through the chaos. "That's what every American unit does. So they've positioned their heavy weapons to cover our defensive positions. But look," she pointed to the 3-story building on their eastern flank. "Their command post, the fighter with the radio coordinating fires. I can see his antenna from here." Kowalski squinted through the smoke. She was right. A thin black antenna protruded from a third-floor window, barely visible. "They've concentrated their forces on the western and northern approaches," Maya continued, speaking rapidly. "Classic L-shaped ambush, but their eastern flank, where their CP is, only has 2, maybe 3 fighters. They assumed we'd never push toward their leadership element. It's a blind spot." "How the hell do you know that?" Specialist Carter demanded, his face streaked with blood from a shrapnel cut. "Because I've analyzed 47 Taliban ambushes in this province alone," Maya snapped. "They use the same tactical doctrine. Heavy fire from the kill zone, light security on their command element. They're arrogant. They think we're already beaten." Lieutenant Chen groaned, trying to focus through the pain. "Captain, you're intel, not infantry." "Right now, sir, I'm the only officer who can still fight." Maya turned to the remaining soldiers. 8 faces, scared but professional. These were good men, trained warriors, but they were pinned and dying. "Here's the situation. We hold here, we're dead in 20 minutes when they maneuver to flank us. We wait for air support, we bleed out. Or we do what they'll never expect, we attack." "That's insane," Davis whispered. "That's exactly why it'll work." Maya grabbed a broken piece of mirror from the shattered Humvee, using it to check the angles without exposing herself. "Kowalski, you take 4 men and establish a support by fire position from that compound." She pointed to a low building to their right. "Suppressive fire on those rooftop positions. Make them think we're trying to break west." Kowalski's eyes narrowed. He was a 12-year veteran, had fought in Fallujah, Ramadi, Kandahar. He'd seen officers panic, freeze, make stupid decisions that got people killed. But this woman, this intel officer they'd all dismissed, was describing a legitimate tactical assault with the precision of an infantry school instructor. "And you, ma'am?" "I take Carter, Davis, and Morrison. We move fast and low through that alley." She traced the route with her finger. It's a dead angle from their main positions, 50 meters to their CP. We breach, clear the building, eliminate their command element. Without coordination, their ambush falls apart. You've never done a building clearance in combat, Carter protested. Maya's eyes were hard as flint. I've done 23 training iterations at the shoot house in Fort Benning. I'm expert marksman with the M4. And unlike you, specialist, I have no other choice to offer. So either follow my orders or sit here and die. Your call. The soldiers looked at each other. Then slowly Kowalski nodded. I'm in, Captain. You get us moving, I'll make those bastards keep their heads down. One by one the others nodded. Even Davis, terrified Davis, checked his magazine and chambered around. Maya keyed the radio. Hammerfall Reaper 6. Be advised, we are initiating tactical assault on enemy command position. Air support directs fires to grid November Kilo 7354. How copy? Static then, Reaper 6, say again, you're assaulting. Affirmative, we're not waiting around to die. Reaper 6 out. She turned to her assault team. 3 soldiers who 10 minutes ago wouldn't have trusted her to guard a supply room. Rules of engagement are simple. We move fast, shoot straight, and don't stop until every hostile is down. Check your corners, watch your spacing, and for God's sake, don't bunch up. Questions? Davis raised a shaking hand. Ma'am, have you ever killed anyone before? Maya met his eyes. The honest answer was no. She'd spent her entire military career behind computer screens, analyzing intercepts, building target packages for others to execute. She'd never pulled a trigger on another human being, never felt the recoil as a bullet left the chamber to end a life. No, she said quietly, but I'm about to. She turned to Kowalski. Give us 30 seconds to get in position, then light them up. Make it look like you're trying to push west toward Route Silver. Kowalski gripped her shoulder. For the first time, there was no skepticism in his eyes. Don't get yourself killed, ma'am. Turns out we might need you. Maya allowed herself a grim smile. Sergeant, I didn't come to Afghanistan to hide. I came to fight. She checked her rifle one last time. Selector switched to semi-auto, sight picture good, magazine seated properly. Her hands weren't shaking anymore. The fear was still there, cold and sharp in her belly, but it was locked away in a box she'd deal with later. Right now, there was only the mission. Alpha team on me, she commanded. They moved to the breach point, a narrow alley choked with garbage and abandoned market stalls. Maya could see the 3-story building looming ahead, insurgent muzzle flashes still sparking from its windows. Somewhere inside was the man coordinating this ambush, the commander who thought he'd trapped another American patrol. He had no idea what was coming for him. Maya glanced at her watch. 25 seconds. She controlled her breathing, in for 4 counts, hold for 4, out for 4. An old technique her father had taught her for managing pre-combat stress. 15 seconds. Carter crossed himself. Morrison whispered something that might have been a prayer. Davis just stared ahead, his jaw clenched so tight Maya could see the muscles jumping. 10 seconds. This was it, the moment that would define everything. Either she'd lead these men through hell and come out the other side, or they'd all die in this miserable alley in a country none of them would ever truly understand. There was no middle ground, no partial credit. 5 seconds. Maya raised her fist, the signal to prepare to move. Her heart hammered, but her hand was steady. Every hour of training, every simulation, every range qualification had led to this exact moment. 3 seconds. She could hear her father's voice. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's being terrified and doing it anyway. 1 second. On the far side of the street, Kowalski's team opened fire, a thunderous barrage of suppressive fire that raked across the western rooftops. Exactly as planned, the insurgent fighters shifted their attention, returning fire, thinking the Americans were attempting a breakout. Move, Maya hissed. and they ran into the jaws of death, toward a building full of men who wanted to kill them, led by a captain who'd never fired a shot in anger, but was about to become something she'd never imagined. A killer. Maya's boots pounded the dirt as she sprinted down the alley, Carter and Davis flanking her, Morrison covering their rear. 50 meters had never seemed so far. Every shadow could hide a fighter, every doorway a death trap. The suppressive fire from Kowalski's position roared like thunder, but it felt miles away. 30 meters. A door burst open to their left. An insurgent stepped out, AK-47 rising. Maya's rifle came up instinctively, front sight, center mass, squeeze. 2 shots cracked out before her conscious mind caught up. The fighter dropped, his weapon clattering on the stones. She just killed a man. No time to process it. Keep moving. 20 meters. Contact right, Carter shouted. He engaged a fighter in a second-story window, his round sparking off the concrete frame. The insurgent ducked back, buying them seconds. 10 meters. They hit the building's outer wall, stacking up beside the entrance. Maya's heart hammered so hard she thought it might burst through her chest. This was it, the fatal funnel, the doorway where assaulters died. Every instructor at Fort Benning had drilled it into her. The first man through takes the highest risk. She was the first man. Maya pulled a flashbang from her vest with trembling fingers. Frag out. She yanked the pin, tossed it through the doorway, turned her head and opened her mouth to equalize pressure. The explosion was a physical punch, blinding white light and ear-splitting crack that shook dust from the ceiling. Before the echo faded, Maya was moving, flowing through the doorway in a low crouch, rifle up, scanning for targets. The room was a chaos of overturned furniture and hanging dust. 2 insurgents stumbled blindly, disoriented by the flashbang. Maya's training took over: breathe, aim, fire. 2 shots. The first fighter went down. Transition. 2 more shots. The second collapsed. Clear, she shouted, already moving to the stairwell. Her hands were steady now, locked in that strange combat autopilot where everything slowed down and sped up simultaneously. The stairs were narrow, dark, perfect ambush terrain. Carter moved up beside her and they bounded upward, one covering while the other advanced. Second-floor landing. A hallway stretched into darkness, doors on both sides. A figure emerged from a doorway backlit by a window. Friend or foe? Maya's mind processed it in microseconds. No uniform, weapon rising, hostile. She fired. The man twisted and fell. Stairs, Morrison called from behind. Maya spun. An insurgent was charging down from the 3rd floor, screaming, an ancient Lee-Enfield rifle in his hands. She engaged. 1 round struck his shoulder, spinning him. The second hit his chest. He tumbled down the stairs and lay still. Her shoulder burned. Maya glanced down and saw blood seeping through her uniform. When had she been hit? She hadn't even felt it. Adrenaline was a hell of a drug. Ma'am, you're hit. Davis's voice was panicked. I'm fine, keep moving. She wasn't fine, but fine was relative. The wound was superficial, a grazing shot that burned like fire but hadn't hit anything vital. She could still fight. They reached the 3rd floor. The command post was close now. She could hear radio chatter in Pashto behind a heavy wooden door. The insurgent commander was inside, probably still coordinating his fighters, unaware that death was standing outside his door. Maya didn't bother with subtlety this time. Breach. Carter kicked the door. The wood splintered but held. He kicked again. The frame gave way and the door crashed inward. The room beyond was exactly what Maya had expected. A makeshift operations center with maps on the wall, a radio setup, ammunition crates. 3 men. The one at the radio was clearly the leader, older, with a gray beard and sharp eyes that widened in shock as American soldiers poured through his door. He reached for a pistol on the table. Maya shot him twice, center mass. He fell backward over his chair. The second fighter lunged at her with a knife, a long, wicked blade that caught the light. She blocked with her rifle, but he was strong, forcing her back against the wall. The knife slashed toward her throat. Training kicked in. She drove her knee into his groin, broke his grip, created space. Her rifle came up, point-blank range. She pulled the trigger. The third insurgent raised his hands, shouting in Pashto, probably surrendering. But Carter had already fired, his nerves shot, his finger tight on the trigger. The man crumpled. Then it was over. Sudden, violent silence filled the room, broken only by their ragged breathing and the static hiss of the abandoned radio. "Clear," Maya gasped. "Room clear." She staggered to the window, keying her radio with blood-slick fingers. "Kowalski, this is Reeves. Command post is down. All enemy leadership eliminated." A pause, then Kowalski's voice amazed. "Say again, ma'am." "I said we got them, all of them. The command post is destroyed." Outside, the volume of enemy fire was already decreasing. Without coordination, without leadership, the ambush was falling apart exactly as Maya had predicted. Individual fighters were breaking contact, fleeing into the alleys and compounds. The distant whump-whump of helicopter rotors grew louder. The Apache gunships were finally arriving, their 13 cannons already seeking targets. "Reaper elements, this is Dealer 1-6, a pilot's voice crackled over the net. "We have visual on multiple enemy fighters breaking contact, moving north, engaging now." The Apache guns roared, their distinctive sound like ripping canvas. Maya watched through the window as insurgents scattered under the aerial assault. Some tried to fight back with small arms, futile gestures against armored gunships. Others just ran. It was over. Maya slumped against the wall, finally allowing herself to feel the pain in her shoulder, the exhaustion in her limbs, the trembling that came after the adrenaline faded. She looked down at her hands. They were covered in blood, some hers, most not. She'd killed at least 5 men in the last 10 minutes, maybe more. She'd stopped counting. Carter was staring at her with something like awe. "Captain, that was, how did you?" "Training," Maya said quietly. But it wasn't just training. It was instinct, desperation, and something primal she hadn't known existed inside her until today. Davis leaned against a wall, sliding down to sit on the floor, his rifle across his knees. "We're alive," he whispered, like he couldn't quite believe it. "We're actually alive." Morrison was on the radio, coordinating the medevac helicopters that were now inbound. "Hammerfall, this is Reaper 4. We need immediate casualty evacuation. 3 KIA, 5 WIA, including Lieutenant Chen. Enemy forces broken and fleeing. Area is secure for landing." Maya walked to the window and looked down at the street below. The burning Humvee still poured black smoke into the sky. Bodies lay scattered in the dirt, American and insurgent. 3 of her countrymen would never go home. 3 families would receive folded flags and hollow condolences. But 8 men were alive who should have been dead. 8 soldiers who'd been trapped in a kill zone with no hope, who trusted an intel officer they barely knew to lead them through hell. She'd done it. Against every odd, every expectation, every doubt, she'd done it. Kowalski's voice came over the radio. "All Reaper elements, consolidate on the command post building. Prepare casualties for evac." Maya watched as the surviving soldiers emerged from cover, moving with the cautious efficiency of men who just survived something terrible. Kowalski was helping Chen hobble toward the building, the lieutenant's leg hastily bandaged but still bleeding. They climbed the stairs, boots heavy on the wooden steps. When Kowalski reached the 3rd floor and saw the carnage in the command post, 3 dead insurgents, maps and intelligence scattered everywhere, the radio still squawking with confused Pashto, he just stopped and stared. Then he looked at Maya, really looked at her, saw the blood on her uniform, the fierce light in her eyes, the smoking rifle in her hands. "Damn, ma'am," he said softly. "Damn." Medevac Black Hawks thundered down through the dust, their rotors creating a brownout that obscured everything. Maya organized the casualty loading with mechanical precision, critically wounded first, then ambulatory wounded, then the 3 body bags containing what remained of Sergeant Michaels, Corporal Tanner, and PFC Rodriguez. Men who'd been joking at breakfast were now just weight and silence. Chen gripped her arm as medics loaded him onto a stretcher. His face was gray with blood loss, but his eyes were clear. "You saved us, Captain. You saved us all." His voice cracked. "I was wrong about you. Dead wrong." Maya nodded, unable to speak. What could she say? That she'd been terrified. That her hands had shaken so badly before the assault she thought she'd drop her rifle. That she could still see the faces of the men she'd killed, frozen in her memory like photographs. The helicopters lifted off, banking hard to avoid ground fire that never came. The insurgents who'd survived had melted into the countryside, leaving their dead behind. Maya turned to the remaining soldiers. "Kowalski, establish a security perimeter. Carter, start collecting enemy weapons and intelligence materials. Morrison, document everything: photographs, grid coordinates, casualty locations. Davis," she saw his hands shaking as he tried to light a cigarette. "Davis, you did good. Take 5 minutes." They moved to obey, but she caught the looks they exchanged. Respect, yes, but also something else. Distance, like they weren't quite sure what she was anymore. The intelligence haul from the command post was significant: maps showing Taliban safe houses, lists of names, a laptop with potentially valuable data. Maya photographed everything, bagged it according to protocol, her movements automatic while her mind replayed the firefight in endless loop. The knife coming at her throat, the weight of a dying man falling at her feet, the smell of cordite and blood. The quick reaction force arrived 30 minutes later. 2 platoons of heavily armed soldiers expecting to find survivors pinned down and barely hanging on. Instead, they found Maya calmly directing evidence collection while enemy bodies cooled in the Afghan heat. The QRF commander, a captain named Henderson, stared at the scene with open disbelief. "What the hell happened here?" "Ambush," Maya said flatly. "We counterattacked. Enemy command structure eliminated. Remaining hostile forces broke contact." Henderson walked through the battlefield counting bodies. 14 dead insurgents, most killed at close range, some inside buildings. An intel officer led a counter-assault through an ambush. "There wasn't anyone else left to lead it, sir." He studied her blood-soaked uniform, the field dressing on her shoulder, the hollowness in her eyes. "Jesus Christ, Reeves." The convoy back to Hammerfall was silent. Maya sat in the Humvee watching the Afghan landscape roll past, feeling disconnected from her own body. She'd killed 5 men, maybe 6. She couldn't remember if the fighter on the stairs had been her shot or Morrison's. Did it matter? Dead was dead. At Hammerfall, she walked straight to the aid station to have her shoulder properly treated. The medic, a specialist named Tors, whistled at the wound. "1/4 inch to the left and this would have hit your subclavian artery. You'd have bled out in minutes." "Lucky me," Maya said without inflection. "Captain, you should know you're going into shock. The shaking, the emotional flatness, it's normal after combat. You should talk to." "I'm fine, just patch me up." She wasn't fine. That night she sat alone in her tent, staring at her hands. She'd scrubbed them 3 times, but she could still see blood in the creases of her palms under her fingernails. Phantom blood, permanent blood. The after-action report took 2 hours to complete. Maya typed it in the operations center, documenting every detail with clinical precision. Enemy casualties, 14 confirmed KIA. Friendly casualties, 3 KIA, 5 WIA. Enemy command post destroyed. Intelligence materials recovered. Tactical objectives achieved. She didn't mention the terror, or how close they'd come to complete annihilation, or that she'd made decisions in split seconds that would normally take staff officers hours to analyze. Just facts, numbers, outcomes. Major Briggs read it, his expression unreadable. "This is comprehensive, Captain. Well done." "Thank you, sir." He seemed to want to say more, but didn't. just filed the report and dismissed her. The days that followed were strange. The soldiers who'd been with her treated her with quiet respect. Kowalski always nodded when they passed. Davis actually saluted. Carter told anyone who'd listened that she'd cleared a building like she was born to it. But the respect came with distance, like she'd crossed some invisible line that separated her from normal officers. The command staff was worse. They avoided eye contact. Conversations stopped when she entered rooms. She caught whispers, exceeded her authority, should have held position and waited for air support. Creates a precedent problem. Maya requested a meeting with Colonel Harrington to discuss the action. His aide said the colonel was busy. She requested again, still busy. She began to understand they didn't know what to do with her. A week later, she overheard two captains talking outside the operations center. "Pentagon's nervous," one said. "A female intel officer personally killing enemy fighters. In close combat, it complicates the women in combat narrative." She saved 8 lives. Yeah, but she also made some general's policy brief obsolete. Easier to bury it than deal with the implications. Maya walked away before they could see her. She visited Chen in the field hospital that afternoon. His leg was stabilized, and he'd be medevaced to Germany for surgery. "I put you in for a Silver Star," he said. "You earned it. Hell, you earned more than that." "Thank you, sir." "Maya," he used her first name for the first time. "What you did out there. I've been doing this for 8 years, and I've never seen anything like it. The tactical thinking, the execution, the sheer guts. You belong here. Don't let anyone tell you different." She nodded, but his words felt hollow. Because the people who mattered, the colonels and generals and policymakers, were sending a different message through their silence. 2 weeks after the ambush, Maya was called to a meeting with Major Briggs. She expected a commendation briefing or a tactical discussion. Instead, he slid a paper across his desk. "Reassignment orders. You're being moved to the division intelligence staff, pure analysis role, no more patrols." Maya stared at the paper. "Sir, I don't understand. My current position is being restructured. This is a better use of your skills, Captain. Analysis, not field work." Translation: get back in your box. Stop complicating things. Is this because of what happened in Darwazgai? Briggs's silence was answer enough. Maya picked up the orders, her jaw tight. "When do I transfer?" 2 weeks. Get your replacement briefed." She stood, saluted, and left. Outside, the Afghan sun beat down mercilessly. Soldiers moved between buildings, going about the routine of war. Somewhere in the distance, artillery fired outgoing rounds, supporting an operation she'd probably planned intelligence for. She'd saved 8 lives, destroyed an enemy cell, brought back valuable intelligence, and her reward was exile to a desk, tucked away where her competence couldn't embarrass anyone. Maya walked to her tent and sat on her cot, staring at the photo of her father. What would he think? Would he be proud, ashamed, disappointed that she'd let them sideline her? She didn't know. She just knew that something had broken inside the machine, and instead of fixing it, they were trying to hide the pieces. The war continued. The mission continued. But for Captain Maya Reeves, the fight had suddenly become much more complicated than just defeating the enemy. Colonel James Harrington read the classified after-action report for the 4th time, his office silent except for the hum of the air conditioner struggling against the Afghan heat. 42 years old, West Point graduate, 2 Bronze Stars, he'd commanded men in combat for nearly 2 decades. He thought he'd seen everything. But this was different. The helmet camera footage from Specialist Carter sat frozen on his laptop screen. Captain Reeves moving through that building like a seasoned infantryman, her movements precise, lethal, professional. He clicked play again, watched her breach the command post, watched her engage 3 enemy fighters in close quarters, watched her win. His secure phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID and suppressed a sigh. Pentagon, 3rd call this week. Colonel Harrington. Jim, it's Brigadier General Kellerman. The voice was smooth, political. I'm calling about the Darwazgai incident. Incident? Harrington's jaw tightened. What about it, sir? We've reviewed the reports. Impressive tactical outcome, no question, but there are concerns about the optics. Optics? Harrington made it sound like a profanity. A female intelligence officer leading an infantry assault, personally engaging in close-quarters combat, confirmed kills in double digits. Jim, you understand how this plays in the current environment. The women in combat debate is extremely sensitive right now. Captain Reeves saved 8 American lives, sir. She destroyed a significant insurgent cell. She demonstrated exceptional tactical competence under fire. Nobody's questioning her competence. A pause. But her actions raise policy questions. Intelligence officers aren't supposed to lead combat assaults. There are protocols, chains of command. Her chain of command was dead or incapacitated, Harrington interrupted. She was the ranking effective officer. She made the right call. Perhaps, but the situation is complicated by her gender. If we make a big deal of this, medals, press coverage, it becomes ammunition for both sides of the debate. Some will use it to push for expanded combat roles. Others will say she never should have been there in the first place. Harrington stood, packing his small office. So your solution is what? Bury it, pretend it didn't happen. We're suggesting a quiet recognition, maybe an Army Commendation Medal. Transfer her to a position where this won't happen again. Keep it low profile. She's being recommended for a Silver Star. Jim, Kellerman's voice hardened. Be practical. This becomes a media circus. It helps nobody. Not you, not her, not the mission. There are reporters already sniffing around, asking questions about the female officer's heroic stand. We need to manage this carefully. Harrington looked at the frozen image on his screen, Maya's face, dirt-streaked and focused in the seconds before she breached that door. Manage it carefully. You mean sweep it under the rug. I mean protect her from becoming a political football. You think she wants to be the poster child for this debate? Trust me, the attention will destroy her career faster than enemy fire ever could. The call ended. Harrington sat heavily in his chair, the weight of command suddenly feeling very heavy. He'd seen this before, politics trumping performance, image management overriding reality. It never sat right with him, but he understood the game. He pulled up Maya's personnel file. Stellar evaluations, top-tier performance reviews, fluent in 2 Afghan languages, 3 commendations for intelligence work that had directly saved American lives, and now combat leadership that would make any infantry officer proud. And they wanted to hide it. His sergeant major, a grizzled veteran named Tors, knocked and entered. Sir, you wanted to see the intelligence haul from Darwazgai. Yes, what did we get? Tors laid out several folders. Significant, sir. The laptop Captain Reeves recovered contained names and locations of 3 Taliban shadow governors, 2 weapons caches, and communications about a planned attack on Hammerfall itself. She basically prevented our own base from being hit. Harrington absorbed this. Maya hadn't just reacted to an ambush, she'd inadvertently disrupted a much larger operation. Has this been briefed up the chain? Yes, sir. Division is calling it one of the most valuable intelligence recoveries of the quarter. And yet I'm getting calls about managing the optics. Harrington shook his head. What's the scuttlebutt in the ranks about Captain Reeves? Tors didn't hesitate. The men who were there worship her, sir. Kowalski told me she's the most tactically sound officer he's worked with in 12 years. The rest of the battalion, they're watching, waiting to see what we do. Meaning if we punish competence, if we hide what she did because it's politically inconvenient, we send a message. Not just about women in combat, about whether doing the right thing matters more than playing it safe. Harrington was quiet for a long moment. Outside, he could hear the sounds of the base, generators, vehicles, soldiers training, the machinery of war grinding forward. "What would you do, Sergeant Major?" Torres met his eyes. "Sir, I'd tell the truth. What she did, how she did it, and why it mattered. Let the politicians argue policy. Our job is to recognize courage when we see it." After Torres left, Harrington pulled up another file, media queries. A reporter from Stars and Stripes, another from the Washington Post, a request from a documentary crew, all asking about the female officer who fought off an ambush. The story was already leaking. He could cooperate and control the narrative, or stay silent and let others fill the vacuum with speculation and half-truths. He thought about his own daughter, 16 years old, asking him over their last video call if women could really be soldiers like Daddy. He'd given her the politically safe answer, someday maybe, when policies change. What would he tell her now? Harrington opened a fresh document and began typing. Recommendation for award of Silver Star, Captain Maya Reeves. The citation needed to be perfect. Not because of politics or optics, but because 8 men were alive who should be dead, and that deserved to be acknowledged regardless of the complexity it created. His phone rang again. Another Pentagon number. He let it go to voicemail. For the next hour, he worked on the citation, choosing each word carefully, describing the tactical situation, the desperate circumstances, the split-second decisions that meant the difference between annihilation and victory. He included the helmet cam footage, witness statements, the intelligence recovery, everything. When he finished, he sat back and reread it. This would cause problems. Kellerman would be furious. There would be uncomfortable conversations, maybe even career consequences. But he thought about Torres' words, whether doing the right thing matters more than playing it safe. Harrington had joined the Army 30 years ago because he believed in something bigger than politics, bigger than career advancement. He believed in honor, courage, and recognizing excellence regardless of whether it fit neatly into policy briefs. He hit print and signed the recommendation with a firm hand. Then he picked up his phone and called his operations sergeant. "Sergeant Mills, I need you to schedule a battalion formation, full combat element, tomorrow 900 hours. Sir, the entire battalion. Every swinging dick who can stand, and make sure Captain Reeves is present, front and center." "Yes, sir. May I ask what this is about?" Harrington looked at the citation on his desk, at Maya's personnel photo clipped to the file. A slight woman with serious eyes who'd killed 14 enemy fighters and saved 8 American lives while officers in air-conditioned offices worried about optics. "It's about telling the truth, Sergeant, however inconvenient that might be." He hung up and opened his email. The draft message to General Kellerman was simple. "Sir, with respect, I disagree. Awards package attached. Formation scheduled for tomorrow. Respectfully, Col Harrington." His finger hovered over the send button. This was a line. Once crossed, there was no going back. His career might stall. His next promotion might evaporate. The comfortable path forward might close. He thought of 8 soldiers who trusted an intel officer to lead them through hell. She hadn't worried about her career in that moment. She'd worried about bringing them home alive. Harrington clicked send. Outside his window, the sun was setting over the Afghan mountains, painting them in shades of amber and shadow. Somewhere in this base, Maya was probably working late, analyzing intelligence, doing her job while others debated whether she should be punished for excellence. Tomorrow that would change. Tomorrow, 600 soldiers would learn what really happened in Darwazgai. And the Pentagon could deal with the consequences. The Afghan sun was already brutal at 8:45 hours when the battalion began assembling on the parade ground. 600 soldiers in combat uniforms, arranged in company formations, their shadows sharp against the pale dust. Word had spread through Hammerfall like wildfire. The old man was calling a full formation. Nobody knew why. Captain Maya Reeves stood in the front rank of headquarters company, her stomach churning with anxiety. Sergeant Mills had delivered the message personally. "Colonel wants you front and center, ma'am, full dress uniform." That was all. No explanation, no context. Around her, she felt the weight of attention. Soldiers stealing glances, whispered speculation. She'd been at Hammerfall for 2 months now, and she still couldn't read the temperature. Some soldiers treated her with respect bordering on reverence, others with uncomfortable distance. The command staff had been notably silent since her reassignment orders came through. Those orders sat in her tent, unsigned. She had 1 week left before her transfer to the division staff. 1 week before she'd be buried in a basement operations center, safely away from anything that could complicate Pentagon briefings. "Battalion, attention," Sergeant Major Torr's voice cracked like a whip. 600 boots slammed together in unison. The formation snapped rigid. Colonel Harrington emerged from the operations center, a folder under his arm, his expression carved from stone. He walked with the measured pace of a man who'd made a decision and wouldn't be swayed from it. Maya's heart hammered. Whatever this was, it involved her. She could feel it. Harrington mounted the small platform that served as a speaking podium. His eyes swept across the formation: infantry soldiers, support staff, headquarters personnel. The men and women who fought this war in the spaces between the headlines. At ease, the battalion relaxed marginally. "I called this formation to address something that's been bothering me, something about how we measure worth in combat, how we recognize courage, how we decide who belongs in the fight." Maya's throat went dry. 6 weeks ago, a routine patrol was ambushed in the village of Darwazgai. You all know this. What you might not know is the complete story. Harrington opened his folder. The after-action report makes for interesting reading. Enemy force, approximately 40 Taliban fighters with crew-served weapons, RPGs, and prepared positions. Classic L-shaped ambush. 3 Americans killed in the initial contact. 5 wounded, including the patrol leader. Radio communication compromised. Air support grounded by weather, 40 minutes out. The formation was utterly silent now, every eye focused on the colonel. The patrol should have been destroyed. Tactically, they were in an impossible situation, pinned down in a kill zone, bleeding out, outgunned, and surrounded. Standard doctrine says you consolidate your position, treat casualties, and wait for support. Harrington's voice hardened. But there was a problem with standard doctrine that day. At the rate they were taking casualties, they wouldn't survive 40 minutes. Maya felt her face burning. She stared straight ahead, military bearing rigid, but inside she was screaming for this to stop. "Don't do this. Don't make me the center of this." So the ranking effective officer made a different choice. Instead of waiting to die, she analyzed the tactical situation using her intelligence training, identified the enemy command post, recognized a vulnerability in their defensive positioning. And then, this is the interesting part, she led a direct assault through the ambush. Harrington pulled out a paper. Maya recognized it, the detailed casualty report from the S2 shop. "Let me read you the results. Enemy killed in action during the assault, 14 confirmed. That includes 3 enemy killed in the command post itself in close quarters combat. Additionally, the tactical decisions made during this assault led to the collapse of the entire enemy force, 40 insurgents either killed, wounded, or forced to break contact." A murmur rippled through the formation. Soldiers exchanged glances. The intelligence recovered from that command post has since led to the capture of 3 Taliban shadow governors, the discovery of 2 major weapons caches, and the disruption of a planned attack on this very base. Harrington let that sink in. 8 American soldiers survived that day who should have died. We're currently exploiting intelligence that will save dozens more lives. He paused, his eyes finding Maya in the formation. "Some of you expressed doubts when Captain Reeves arrived. I heard the comments. Desk jockey. Intel weenie. Not built for combat. Some of you made bets on how long she'd last before requesting transfer to a safer posting. Maya wanted the earth to swallow her. This was worse than the firefight. At least then she could shoot back. So let me be very clear about something. Harrington's voice cut like steel. Captain Maya Reeves has 14 confirmed enemy kills. That's more than anyone in this battalion. More than me. More than Sergeant Major Torres, who's been doing this for 22 years. She made tactical decisions under fire that saved American lives and destroyed enemy capability. He held up the paper, his hand steady. This is the official citation for the Silver Star I've recommended her for. I'm going to read it to you. All of it. Because I want there to be absolutely no confusion about what happened in Darwazgai or about whether Captain Reeves belongs in combat. Maya's vision blurred. She blinked hard, forcing back tears. Don't cry, not here, not in front of 600 soldiers. Harrington began reading. His voice carried across the parade ground, steady and formal, detailing every moment of that terrible morning. The ambush, the casualties, the impossible decision, the assault through enemy fire. Displaying exceptional courage under fire, Captain Reeves led her element through intense enemy resistance, personally engaging and neutralizing multiple hostile forces at close range. The words painted a picture Maya barely recognized. She remembered terror, confusion, desperate improvisation. The citation made it sound heroic, noble. It hadn't felt noble. It had felt like survival. Her tactical acumen and aggressive leadership directly resulted in the destruction of the enemy force and the preservation of American lives at great personal risk. She glanced sideways without moving her head. Kowalski stood 3 ranks back, his face proud. Carter and Morrison were in Alpha Company's formation, both standing impossibly straight. Davis was actually crying, tears running down his face, not bothering to hide them. For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity, in action against an enemy of the United States, Captain Maya Reeves is awarded the Silver Star. Harrington lowered the paper. The silence that followed was profound. Now I know what some of you are thinking. She's an intelligence officer. She exceeded her authority. She should have stayed in her lane. Let me address that. His voice turned cold. When the ranking infantry officer is bleeding out in the street, there is no lane. There's only the mission and the lives of American soldiers. Captain Reeves understood that better than some people who have worn the uniform for decades. He looked directly at Maya now. Captain Reeves front and center. Her legs moved automatically, carrying her forward through the formation. She marched to the platform and snapped to attention, saluting. Harrington returned it, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small blue box. The Silver Star medal gleamed in the morning sun as he pinned it to her uniform. "Well done, Captain," he said quietly just for her. "You earned this 100 times over." "Thank you, sir," she managed, her voice barely a whisper. He stepped back and saluted her. She returned it crisp and precise. Then something unexpected happened. From somewhere in the formation, someone began clapping, then another, then another. Within seconds, the entire battalion was applauding, 600 soldiers creating a thunderous wall of sound that echoed off the mountains. Maya stood frozen, overwhelmed. This wasn't regulation. Formations didn't applaud, but nobody stopped it. Harrington stood beside her, a slight smile on his face, letting it continue. Lieutenant Chen was there, on crutches, having refused medical evacuation until after this ceremony. He met her eyes across the parade ground and nodded once, a gesture of profound respect between warriors. The applause finally faded. Harrington dismissed the formation. As soldiers broke ranks, many detoured past Maya, handshakes, nods, quiet words of respect. The skepticism had burned away in the crucible of Darwazgai, leaving only truth. Sergeant Major Torres approached. "Hell of a thing, ma'am. You've got the entire battalion's respect now." I just did what needed doing, Sergeant Major. That's exactly why you have their respect. As the crowd dispersed, Harrington pulled Maya aside. Your transfer orders, I've canceled them. She stared at him. Sir, you're staying right here doing exactly what you've been doing. If the Pentagon doesn't like it, they can take it up with me. His eyes were hard. We don't hide excellence in this battalion, Captain. We recognize it and we use it. Clear. Crystal, sir. He handed her the citation. Keep this. Frame it. And the next time someone tells you that you don't belong somewhere, you show them this and ask them how many enemy fighters they've killed while saving 8 American lives. Maya took the paper, her hands finally steady. Permission to speak freely, sir. Granted. Thank you for believing the truth mattered more than the politics. Harrington smiled, a rare expression. Captain, I've been doing this long enough to know that politics are temporary. But truth and courage, those are permanent. Don't ever forget that. 3 weeks after the formation, Maya was in the operations center analyzing intercepts when a group of new replacements arrived at Forward Operating Base Hammerfall. She watched through the window as they climbed off the Chinook, fresh-faced and nervous, squinting against the Afghan sun like everyone did their first day in country. She remembered being that person. The doubt, the uncertainty, the whispered comments she wasn't supposed to hear. Captain Reeves, a voice interrupted her thoughts. It was Sergeant Mills. Colonel wants you on the planning brief for Operation Iron Thunder. Says he specifically needs your tactical input. Tactical input, not just intelligence analysis. The word still felt strange but good. Since the formation, everything had shifted. She wasn't the intel officer who stayed in the TOC anymore. She was the intel officer who'd proven she could fight, and that changed how people listened when she spoke. The planning session lasted 3 hours. Maya sat at the table with the infantry commanders, not in the back like before, but right there as they debated approach routes and contingency plans. When she suggested a flanking maneuver based on enemy patterns she'd identified, Lieutenant Chen, back from medical leave with a pronounced limp, nodded immediately. That's solid. We'll integrate it into the assault plan. No skepticism, no dismissal, just professional acceptance. After the brief, Maya headed to the Chow Hall. The new replacements were huddled at a table near the entrance, their conversation carrying across the room. Did you see that intel officer? One of them said, a private with a thick Texas accent. They've got women doing headquarters work now. Seems weird, but whatever. Another laughed. Dude, she's probably just here to process paperwork and brief the real soldiers. I give her 2 weeks before she's crying to go home. Man, I don't know why they even send them to combat zones. It's not like they can. Private, Sergeant Kowalski's voice cut through their conversation like a knife. He'd appeared behind them, his face carved from granite. You want to finish that sentence? The Texas private swallowed hard. No, Sergeant, I was just making assumptions about an officer you know nothing about. Kowalski pulled out a chair and sat down, forcing the replacements to look at him. Let me educate you kids about something. That intel officer you're dismissing, Captain Reeves, she's got more confirmed enemy kills than anyone in this battalion. The replacement stared at him like he'd spoken in a foreign language. 14 confirmed, Kowalski continued, his voice flat and factual. She cleared a 3-story building under fire, eliminated an enemy command post in close-quarters combat, and saved 8 American lives while wounded. She's been awarded the Silver Star for valor, and she did all of that while people like you assumed she couldn't handle combat. The Texas private's face had gone pale. I didn't know, Sergeant. No, you didn't. That's the problem with assumptions. They make you look like an idiot when reality shows up. Kowalski leaned forward. So here's how this works. You want to survive your deployment. You listen when Captain Reeves talks. You respect her tactical judgment. And you remember that she's forgotten more about combat in this province than you've ever learned. He stood, his eyes sweeping across all of them. Questions? No, Sergeant, they mumbled in unison. Good, now finish your chow and report to supply. You've got equipment to draw. Maya had heard the entire exchange from where she stood in the serving line. As Kowalski walked past, she caught his eye. He winked, the closest thing to humor the grizzled sergeant ever showed. She took her tray outside, finding a quiet spot on the blast wall where she could eat in peace and watch the sun descend toward the mountains. The Afghan landscape was brutal and beautiful in equal measure, all sharp edges and ancient patience. Her phone buzzed, a rare email from her mother back in Ohio. So proud of you, sweetheart. Your father would be too. The newspaper here ran a story about your silver star. Everyone's asking about you. Maya smiled. Her father would understand what she'd done, and why. He'd understand that combat wasn't about gender or policy debates. It was about doing what needed to be done when people's lives hung in the balance. A shadow fell across her. Lieutenant Chen, leaning on his cane, holding his own dinner tray. Mind if I join you, Captain? Not at all, sir. They ate in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the mountains turn purple in the fading light. I deployed 4 times before this, Chen said finally. Fought alongside hundreds of soldiers. You know what I learned in Darwazgai? Maya looked at him. I learned that courage doesn't care about what people expect. It just shows up when it's needed. He met her eyes. You showed up, Maya. When it mattered most, you showed up. So did you, sir. You held that line while bleeding out. Yeah, but I was supposed to. I'm infantry. It's literally my job. He shook his head. You weren't supposed to lead an assault. You weren't supposed to clear buildings. You weren't supposed to survive that day, let alone win. But you did all of it anyway. The radio on Maya's belt crackled. Captain Reeves, we've got new intercepts that need analysis. How soon can you get to the TOC? She keyed the radio. On my way. To Chen, she said, duty calls. Always does. He raised his water bottle in salute. Go do what you do best, Captain. Maya walked back across the fire base, her silver star catching the last rays of sunlight. Soldiers nodded as she passed, genuine respect, earned in blood and fire. The new replacements had already heard the story, their skepticism dying before it could take root. Inside the operations center, a map of the province spread across the wall, dotted with enemy positions and friendly units. Major Briggs looked up as she entered. Reeves, glad you're here. We've got chatter about a possible ambush on Route Silver. Need your assessment. She studied the intercepts, her mind already working through patterns and possibilities. This was her element, the intersection of intelligence and operations, analysis and action. Based on the communication patterns and grid references, I'd say they're setting up near grid November Kilo 7354. Same area as Darwazgai, actually. They're using similar tactical language. Briggs nodded, marking the location. Confidence level. Hi, sir. Recommend we either avoid the route or go in heavy with air support on standby. Agreed. He paused. You want to brief the patrol commander yourself. 6 months ago, that question would have been unthinkable. Now it was routine. Yes, sir. I'll make sure they know exactly what they're walking into. As Maya prepared the briefing, she thought about those new replacements and their easy assumptions. They'd learn, just like everyone else did. They'd learn that combat didn't care about their expectations or their biases. It only cared about competence, courage, and the will to fight. She'd proven she had all 3. The doubters would always exist. There would always be another batch of replacements, another skeptical officer, another person who looked at her and saw only what they expected to see rather than what she actually was. But that was their problem, not hers. Maya Reeves had walked through fire and come out forged into something stronger. She'd led men in combat, made impossible decisions, and brought her people home alive. The silver star on her chest wasn't just a medal, it was proof that she belonged exactly where she was. That night, as she finally crawled into her rack after 18 hours on duty, she pulled out her father's last letter. The paper was worn soft from reading, the ink faded but still legible. Don't let anyone tell you what you can't do. Show them what you can. She'd done exactly that. Outside, the fire base settled into its nightly rhythm. Guard towers manned, weapons loaded, soldiers keeping watch over a small piece of contested ground in a war that had no easy answers. Captain Maya Reeves closed her eyes, her rifle within arm's reach like always, and slept the sleep of a warrior who'd earned her place in the fight. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new missions, new doubters to prove wrong. She was ready.
Ieri sera ciucciandotela via.
She'd
Ieri sono
always
stato da
been
Ca,
ready.
ero anche da Dani.
They
È molto
just
vero
hadn't
zio,
known
ieri
it
da Dani non
until
sono
she
passato.
showed them.
Io da ieri da
The
Dani non
end.
sono passato perché non volevo spoilerarmi Demon Soul, però c'ero. Ero il lurchino. Ho visto che c'eravate tutti ieri, infatti mi dispiaceva non poter chiacchierare con voi, però ci tengo a non spoilerarmi Demon Soul, sarà l'ultimo vero From che dovrò giocare.